everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be trying out KSRESIN. This is a brand new formula to me. I haven't worked with it before, so I'm excited to see how all of this plays out. So I got two different formulas. I got the Liquid Art epoxy, and then I got the Liquid Art Ultra UV epoxy. And the difference between these things is this one is supposed to have more of a UV inhibitor, so it's supposed to help with the yellow resistance in the long run. And that's one thing that we will put to the test. I'll get to that in a little bit. So with the pricing of these items, for the 8-ounce kit, this was $15. And for this 8-ounce kit, it was $20, and I'm sure the extra $5 is going towards that UV inhibitor. So on the surface, it looks like a good deal, but I really think it comes down to, like, it looks like a good deal because you're able to buy smaller amounts. I do think that when I break it down ounce for ounce, this is the most expensive resin that I've ever used. One thing I just noticed though is that it gets significantly more inexpensive the higher the amount that you get, which I know is common with a lot of products, but like it's a pretty decent sized jump. So for an 8-ounce kit, it's $20, and that makes it at about $2.50 an ounce. But for 16 ounces, it is $30, which makes it about $1.86 an ounce. And if you get the 32-ounce kit, then it's $40, and that makes it about $1.25 an ounce. So this stuff can be inexpensive, absolutely, but you do have to buy a little bit more. So it's handy to know that you can just drop some cash the first time to try out the product, and then it won't be nearly as much later on if you decide to buy more. The shipping for all of their products is free, so I guess I can factor that in, because shipping can get kind of pricey. It could be $7, $8, $9, $10, you know, for smaller kits, and substantially higher for bigger kits. So the one I'm going to be working with in the video is the Ultra UV epoxy, because I do want to test the yellow resistance. So the way that I'm going to test the UV resistance is I'm going to just make a thin little disc piece like this with the KSRESIN, and then I'm going to make a thin little disc piece with my go-to resin, which is Super Sap CCR, which is the most non-yellowing resin that I personally use, or yellow resistant resin rather. And here's what the recent test I've been doing is looking like. I put them out in the sun July 8th. It is now July 28th, so they've been out there for 20 days, and it's been really extreme conditions though. Like, we've reached record highs. Like, one day was 105 degrees, another day was 104. So these have really just been baking out in the sun. And here are some bezels that I also put the resin in and left out in the sun. And I'm also going to be filling a bezel with the KSRESIN, just an empty bezel, and with the Super Sap, and putting them head to head. But as of right now, the Super Sap is outperforming the Counterculture DIY. The Counterculture is doing great, it really is, but I don't know if it's picking up okay. The Super Sap is still doing better. And I've been asking other people about this, so I'm making sure I'm not biased or whatever. And people consistently say that the Counterculture is yellowing more. So yeah, it is what it is, but that's the type of test that we're going to be doing with this product, especially because they say that they have the best yellow resistance on the market. That's a bold statement. So we're going to find out. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just read off the stuff that is on the website. So Liquid Art Ultra UV Epoxy Resin is a 2-part clear epoxy resin system formulated for creating works of art. If you are looking for an art epoxy resin that cures water clear, the best UV resistance on the market, long working time, and is easy to work with, this product is for you. Yeah, like I said, to say that you have the best UV resistance in the industry, that's a bold statement. So if it's true, then that is really cool. Okay, no VOCs, self-leveling, yada yada yada. All right, cool. Well, now I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to actually start to work with the product. So I'm gonna get my gloves on. I'm going to be working with a mold, a disc mold. We're just gonna mix them up, pour varying thicknesses into these, and let them cure. Check the cure time, all that. Pretty standard stuff for my videos. If you use a respirator, or you'd like to use a respirator, this is what mine looks like. It is a half-mask respirator with organic vapor cartridges. I'll leave the link for respirator info in the description area below. I won't be using it in the video because I need to be able to actually interact with you, so yeah. Oh, wait, actually, I jumped the gun a little bit. We can go ahead and cover the relevant part of the directions first. Okay, so before mixing, liquid art epoxy should be used in a room where humidity is under 50%, okay? And the temperature is 65 to 80 when pouring. When the humidity is over 50%, a dehumidifier should be used. I'm in the desert, I don't really have problems with all of that. Okay, you can set the resin in hot water for 10 minutes to have a thinner mixture, so we're definitely gonna do that. This will also help cause less trapped air in the mixture. Yeah, pretty standard resin stuff. You can heat it up and it will help with the bubbles. That's to calculate your surface area. We're not gonna do any of that. Okay, so we're measuring by volume. Starting with the resin, pour 1 part resin to 1 part hardener into a graduated cup bucket. We're gonna be using this little mixing cup right here. Be sure to measure the exact amount of each part or you may have issues with your mixture. Do not add more hardener than resin. This doesn't make the final product harder and will create issues. Yeah. Do not guess or try to estimate your measurements. Inaccurate measurements will result in soft or sticky spots on surfaces. Yeah. People will low-key bag on me in the comments about how precise I am about the measuring, but if you're not precise, then your product is not going to cure properly. There's no getting around it. I agree, exact measurements. I'd seen YouTube videos in the past when I was first getting into resin and they would like, you know, add in the resin and then they'd add the hardener and sometimes they'd add like another little drop of hardener. Don't do that. So in a clean graduated container, mix the measured resin and hardener, mix slowly for 2 minutes, scrape the sides and the bottom. All right. Okay, pour the mixture, blah, blah, blah. Torching, that helps get rid of the bubbles on the top. We will do that. All right, curing. For best results, the room temperature should be between 65 to 80 with, okay, we already said all that. 12 to 24 hours after the initial pour, your epoxy will be dried to the touch, okay? After 3 days in the recommended environment, your epoxy will be fully cured. Cool, okay, cleaning. Always have a plastic sheet over the work area you're using. Once epoxy is cured, you'll be able to pull the cured epoxy off the plastic, all right. If you need to clean any spilled epoxy while it's still in the liquid state, you can use acetone. I did not know that. I did know that you can use rubbing alcohol. I did not know that you could use acetone. So that's good to know. Once the epoxy is cured, you'll need to remove it by sanding or using a paint stripper. Okay. Word. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get all set up. So I went ahead and I got my hot water ready and put my bottles in it to get it all heated up. The water is about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, about 49 degrees Celsius. I wasn't sure how hot to make it. I feel like just saying hot water is a little bit vague, so I Googled what constitutes as hot water, about 120 Fahrenheit. So that is what this is. It's been in there about 5 minutes now, so I'm gonna leave it in a little bit longer and then we'll get ready to measure and mix it. We're gonna be filling up this little 1 ounce cup. I did notice that I kind of passed part of the instructions where it says that they recommend mixing a minimum of 1 ounce at a time for best results. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So after we get it mixed and measured, I'm gonna pour it into this disc mold. One thing about the product is that I did see that it's recommended that you only pour 1/8 inch layers at a time. So that's pretty thin. This is not a casting resin. It is just a different formula. Regardless, I'm still gonna pour thicker pieces just to see what happens. I feel like worst case scenario, it will just be that there's more bubbles in it. I don't know, we're gonna find out. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and take out my bottles and dry them off. And I'm sure, as you can see, I already put my little squeeze bottle tops on. They really do make measuring so much easier. All right, you wanna make sure your bottles are completely dried off so you're not getting any water into your resin. So I have my cup marked off. Since it is a 1-to-1 ratio, I'm gonna do 15 milliliters of the resin and I'm gonna measure out 15 milliliters of the hardener. We're gonna mix it up a little bit in here. I'm gonna pour it into a bigger cup and finish mixing it in there. If you're brand new to resin and you have any questions about what I'm doing, I have a Resin Basics for Beginners video. You can go ahead and check that out and it will get you up to speed. So I'm gonna start with my resin. It's nice and thin now that it's been heated up. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my hardener. Now I'm going to get ready to stir it up a little bit and then I'm going to pour it into a bigger cup. So one question I do get a lot is what is the odor like with the products I'm working with? I would call this one pretty low odor. I did see that it says that it has no VOCs. I think it even says it like on the front of the bottle. Yeah, 0 VOC and low odor. VOCs are volatile organic compounds, and yeah, this is definitely low odor. I would agree with that. All right, so I really just wanted to get it started in there. Now I'm gonna move it to a bigger cup. Now that it's in my bigger cup, I'm just gonna slowly stir it for a few minutes. So I'm mixing it relatively slow. Generally, the slower you mix, the fewer bubbles would be in it. But even mixing on the slower side, I do notice it is getting a pretty good amount of bubbles. It's just a thicker product. I personally prefer to work with thinner viscosity, lower viscosity resins. When I saw how thick this one was, I wasn't particularly excited about it. But some companies have caught me off guard. Like Counterculture DIY, it was a thicker product and there were no bubbles in the finished pieces. It was pretty extraordinary. So that could happen with this. I feel like there's just newer generation resins coming out that are doing things that the older stuff didn't. I don't know, or that could be pure speculation. We're gonna find out. It's been about 5 minutes, I wanna say, and it's fully incorporated. So I'm gonna leave it for just a little bit and let some of those bubbles rise to the surface. And then we're gonna go ahead and pour it in our molds and our bezel and take a torch across the top and then leave it till tomorrow. The product has been sitting for about 5 minutes now, and a lot of the bubbles have risen to the surface. There's still a lot of micro bubbles in there. I'm gonna pour it in and we're gonna see what happens. Maybe I'll be surprised and maybe all of those bubbles will come out. So we'll see. So I'm gonna start by pouring just a little bit into this one right here. Like I said earlier, the recommended pour amount is an 1/8 of an inch in thickness. So I'm gonna pour a couple that are very thin layers, and then I'm gonna pour a thicker layer. And then I already poured some into the bezel, the little bezel with the white paper background. I just poured some in off camera. It's not particularly interesting, so yeah. And then I'll just pour another one in here just because I have some extra. Okay, I'm gonna let that spread out and do its thing. I'm going to take my torch and just sweep it across the top, and then I'll come back in a while and I'll do it again. And now I'm gonna go ahead and mix up some more off camera and monitor the pot life, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll check in tomorrow just to see how cured these are and then go from there. So I will see you soon. It's been a bit longer than 24 hours. It's actually been about 40. And I'm back to check on the curing and give you the rundown on the pot life and whatnot. So as far as the pot life goes, I got about 45 minutes out of it, which is good. That's how much the bottle says, and like the directions and all that say that you will get out of it is about 45 minutes. So I think that's true. But I didn't heat up the resin beforehand, which does matter. If you heat the resin, it causes it to start to thicken up and cure faster. I'd say it takes about 10 minutes or so off of the pot life. So if I did heat it, I most likely would have gotten closer to 35 minutes instead. And I think the fact that I mixed up a smaller amount, it does factor in as well. Larger amounts will thicken up faster because it's warmer. But yeah, at the 45-minute mark, I was still able to mix some glitter into the resin and pour it into a mold. And that's what's going on right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop that out and see what that looks like. So yeah, at 45 minutes, mixed in the glitter, got it into the mold, all went well. It seems to suspend the glitter pretty well. I do see up at the top it was kind of sinking down, and this is at its thickest. You know, I caught it right before the pot life was over. So I think it's okay at suspending glitter. I do think that some formulas are better, but this is a coating resin, so it's a little different. And I'll actually break that down here in a second. So with all that out of the way, I'm gonna move on and just kind of check these out. And right off the bat, I can see that they have a nice smooth finish to them, like the top part right here. I'm not seeing any weird kind of texture issues. I have done a couple of recent demos in which some of the thinner pieces will have like just a strange texture on them. And it's always the thinner pieces, but it'll be like a crinkled kind of texture. I don't know, it's kind of an odd thing. Some of my viewers have pointed out that the ones doing that are casting resins and not coating resins. Casting resins are meant to be poured thicker. Coating resins are meant to be poured thinner, you know, coating. So if you're pouring the casting resin thin, you may have the texture issue, but like on the flip side of that, two of the main products I work with are classified as casting resins, and they don't do that. So do with that what you will. I think maybe some casting resins can be used for coating and thin layers, and some coating resins can be used for casting, but that doesn't mean they all can, you know? Whatever the case may be, this company does make a casting resin, and I think I would be open to trying it in the future. But as it stands, I would say that this coating resin is not bad as a casting resin. I think I would use it again. I don't really know the bubble situation. I'm gonna wait on that a little bit, because at the 40-hour mark, I can still dent the pieces, like barely, but I can. So I don't know if that's just how the formula is or if it's not done curing. So I want to go ahead and give it the full 3 days before I make those kind of judgments. So I'll be back when all that time has passed, and then we can really gauge it and pop these pieces out. Oh, also, here's the bezel that I poured the resin into off camera. It's just a bezel with a white background. I can also dent the product in there with my nail as well. So like I said, we're just gonna hold off. I'm back. It's been about 4 days now, and it's time to pop the pieces out of the mold. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna start with the thinnest one. Which one even is that? This one right here. So as far as the bubbles go, there's a pretty decent amount of micro bubbles in there, especially for it being such a thin piece. This is probably a little under 1/8 of an inch. Even heating it up as much as we did, there's still a really decent amount of bubbles. And I do have to say that when I was testing the pot life and mixing up the resin with the glitter, when I didn't heat up the resin and just mixed it, there were so many bubbles. There was just an absurd amount of bubbles. So if you don't heat it up, that's a problem you're gonna run into. So there's that one. Here is a thicker piece, and you can see that there are significantly more bubbles in that. That is closer to 1/4 of an inch, I would say. So yeah, I don't know if any of this is particularly relevant, since they told us to keep the pourings at 1/8 of an inch, which isn't really that much. This is just a coating resin. On that note, it didn't cure. Like, it's a good cure, but it's one of those that you can still dent a little tiny bit with your nail. It's not bad, but there's, let's see, look at how many bubbles are in there. Yeah, it's not bad, but you can cause like a little trauma mark with the nail. It does heal, but that's just something to consider. And to really make sure that it's not some mixing error I made, I also mix up another batch, and it's the same. You can barely dent it with your nail, but you can. The same thing happened with the piece that I tested the pot life on. I'm gonna say that that's not human error. That is just part of the formula, which is fine. If you're coating artwork or using it what it's supposed to be used for, it's not particularly relevant that you can dent it with the nail. I did notice that the thinner pieces, if you hold them for too long, they do start to get pliable. I know that some coating resins do that, like art resin is a coating resin that sometimes people will use as a casting resin, and it's just, it's pliable when it's warmed up. So that's just something to take into consideration. Here's that other piece. Yeah, there's a lot of bubbles. And even going back and reading the reviews from KSRESIN, like the site, that's like the main complaint is like it's a great product, but it's just a ton of bubbles. That's what these are looking like. Really good amount of bubbles. If you have a vacuum chamber, it's not much of a problem. If you're using it as a coating resin, it might not be as much of a problem. It's just something to be mindful of. So the big thing for me on if I would use this again is the yellowing test. I have some Super Sap and I have a little disc of the KSRESIN. They're the same thickness, and I'm going to put them out in the sun and see how they perform. But yeah, overall, I mean, it was an alright experience. I don't know if I would go out of my way to buy it again. Maybe I will. It depends on the UV resistance. But outside of that, I think I'm open to trying the casting resin, but I don't know if there's many applications for me as far as the coating resin. But I will say that some of the pros about the product is you can try smaller amounts. You can't with the casting resin, which is kind of a bummer. Like I'll have to buy bigger amounts if I use the casting resin. But you can try smaller amounts, decide if you like it. It's very, very low odor. This is probably one of the most low odor ones that I have encountered. It's inexpensive when you buy it in higher amounts, like I covered much earlier in the video. Also, you can order squeeze tops from the sites. Like, you know how in my videos, well, I don't know if you know, but in most of my videos, if the squeeze tops that I buy from eBay fit on the bottles, I'll put them on there. You can actually just buy squeeze tops from the site. Like, you could just toss them in the cart when you buy the product. So I think that that's a handy thing to know. So yeah, I guess I'm pretty neutral about the product. It's gonna come down to the yellow resistance. So yeah, I guess I covered everything I wanted to cover. I will kind of do a little update later on in another video about how the yellowing is all working out. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the description area below. I thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a great day.